Horror. Noun. A feeling of painful and intense fear, dread, or dismay. Horror. Adjective. Calculated to inspire feelings of dread or horror. Two definitions that don't exactly paint horror as a pleasant emotion, and yet it's something that we as humans so often seek. The thrill, the adrenaline. So many yearn for it that creatives have been fine-tuning chilling stories for centuries now. There's a level of artistry to invoking horror, and nothing exemplifies this more than horror games. Is what I would say if horror games were actually fucking scary. Like, seriously, look at this. These are among the most financially successful horror games in recent memory. This is scary. What is this, Temu.com, Chuck E. Cheese, Mickey Mouse's Reject Brother? This is horror. In all seriousness, though, this is an extremely cherry-picked set of examples. There are plenty of great, highly regarded horror games out there, and even then, I think there's a lot of merit to these goofy, clearly kid-targeted horror games. I know when I was just a wee lad, I was terrified of Five Nights at Freddy's. Seriously, I was the type of kid who went to the comment section of Markiplier's FNAF videos to find the timestamps of all the jump scares so I could cover my screen. I love you, the TARDIS 5469. As the years have gone on, though, I find myself being less and less affected by horror games, and horror as a genre in general. And honestly, I don't think this feeling is exclusive to me.
Don't jump scare. Okay. I mean,
I find the reason for this to be pretty simple. Repetition. There are only so many times you can be scared by a loud noise and a creature of varying levels of abhorrence severely violating your personal space. There's a clear intent with many modern horror games to have as broad of an appeal as possible, and I think that's okay. Communities form, people share interests, Funko Pops get made. It's completely fine to have something kind of superficial as an entry to the genre. In my humble, absolutely not professional opinion, though, true horror is achieved through very personal means. Something terrifying for one person might not be at all for another, and I find games that represent and create fear for a select group of highly affected people often are the most impactful in the end. All of this to say, I'm here to share something that's personally terrifying to me. Something that chills me to my core and keeps me up at night. Something that truly defines horror.
Hello!
Okay, I can explain.
It's me, Mario!
The Nintendo 64 was my first console, and Super Mario 64 was the first game I ever played. Okay, I was a little behind on consoles, and if you make fun of me, you're classist. If you asked me to pick a game that transcends being a game, I would tell you Super Mario 64. Of course, it was the icon of gaming's first step into the third dimension, and one of the first games to show the true potential in this entirely new way to play. But it lives on as so much more than just that. Speedrunning, fan creations, memes, it has it all. And I would bet that a lot of people, especially gamers, who have never so much as touched a Nintendo 64, recognize a lot of aspects of this game. There are two aspects of Super Mario 64's input. Okay, can I just start saying Mario 64? I wrote Super Mario 64 in the script, but that's just, nobody says that. Okay. There are two aspects of Mario 64's impact that I find especially interesting. The first would be the massive ROM hacking community. For those more employed than I, ROM hacks are fan-made modifications of the original game, often adding entirely new levels, mechanics, stories, and challenges. This is a common phenomenon for retro games, but I would argue that of every game out there, Mario 64 by far has the biggest and most impressive ROM hacking community. Over the years, creators have pushed the engine far beyond anything Nintendo originally intended, resulting in everything from full-length original campaigns, to weird experimental projects, to, well, whatever this is. It's something that makes Mario 64 really unique as not only a game, but as a medium. The second is the huge amount of mythos surrounding the game. From the years-old Ella's Real playground myth of Luigi being in the game, to the massive, convoluted icebergs showing off the various rumors and supposed horrors of Mario 64, it's got it all. If you look at said iceberg, you'll see that a lot of these rumors stem from Mandela Effect-esque events, with player recollection of the game. Mario 64 is a core memory for a lot of people, experienced as part of many a childhood. This often leads to shared misremembering and foggy veils of nostalgia that prompt a lot of discussion about these aspects of the game. I, for one, can attest to having these experiences at various points in my life. And while at this point I know the game like the back of my hand, there's still always something just a bit surreal about coming back to it. With this combination of a deep and fascinating mythos and a very talented and creative ROM hacking community, they were bound to collide at some point. And that certainly happened in a very interesting way. B3313, 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 it's a weird title. B3313 is a Mario 64 hack initially released in April of 2021, and it's received a variety of updates up through December of 2024. The hack aims to create an experience revolving around various aspects of Mario 64 mythos, such as the personalization theory, cut content, and the beta. Though obviously a platformer at heart, based on its Super Mario 64, there I go, I said it again, based on its Mario 64 origins, I would also very much describe it as a horror game, albeit a non-traditional one. Littered throughout it are many unsettling elements and fever dream-like qualities, aspects that, from what I've seen, are particularly effective on those with a strong connection to the original game. There are a lot of things to talk about with B3313 and how it's able to create a shockingly effective horror experience. Visuals, level design, story, but I think I couldn't do everything justice were I to talk about them all at once, not within the scope of this video. So that's why we'll be taking a look at an aspect of horror games that doesn't often get the brightest spotlight, but one that I think is especially effective in creating the existential nightmare that is B3313, sound. And also because it's for a music and sounds in video games class, that probably contributes. B3313 is in a unique position, as it has the entirety of Mario 64's soundtrack to work with, and by extension, the entirety of the Mario series sound catalog. Through the distortion and redefinition of these existing iconic sounds, B3313 uses sound to properly set the stage for an effective horror experience. I'll categorize the ways B3313 uses sound into three main groups and discuss how the hack is able to use these through its unique nostalgic context, and how it does it to create a highly effective horror experience. One of the easiest ways to unnerve a player is to present them with something alien and unidentifiable. Unfamiliar sound ends up being a particularly effective way to put someone on edge, as we instinctively treat anything we can't immediately recognize with caution, especially in the context of a horror game. B3313 is uniquely positioned to use unfamiliar sounds due to having Mario 64 and the player's presumed nostalgia for its audio to work with. The audio design of Mario 64 is iconic, and to hear a deviation from those recognizable sound clips and music tracks immediately sets a very off-putting stage for the entire experience. In fact, within moments of starting the game, the player will immediately be confronted with something very unfamiliar. Yeah, that's not Mario. These voice clips are actually from the Mario 64 beta, a very well-known artifact of mythos within the Mario 64 community. I would be lying if I said these sounds were, well, even remotely scary. In fact, they're probably quite the opposite. Despite this, I still think they do an important job in setting up effective horror for the future. Your player character, Mario in this case, is an extension of yourself into the game world, and Mario is a character with an iconic voice, to say the least.
Let's go! Mamma mia!
Completely throwing out and replacing the voice of an iconic character is a constant reminder throughout the game that what you're playing isn't Mario 64, at least not the Mario 64 that you know. Setting up for a horror experience is just as important as the actual scares themselves, and I think stripping a familiar and beloved character of their typical voice is a great way to do so. If you want a more straightforward example though, consider one of B3313's most common ambient cues, the heavy wind that plays in certain spooky areas. It's not overly loud, it's not some dramatic musical cue, and it's not accompanied by any jump scare. Well, usually at least. It's just there, severely out of place in the funny Wahoo Man game. It doesn't resemble any ambient track from the original game, and the result is a kind of immediate unease that puts you on edge as soon as you hear it. It's the perfect demonstration of how an unfamiliar, unplaceable noise can make a space feel unsafe long before anything actually happens. While unfamiliar sounds rely on directly subverting a player's nostalgic experiences to create horror, familiar sounds alter and play off of memories of the base game in order to create unease. And I'd argue that this is probably the most effective way B3313 is able to consistently create unsettling ambience. I'd split familiar sounds into three main categories based on how they're used and implemented in B3313. Believable sounds, altered sounds, and redefined sounds. Believable sounds are the least directly tied to relying on player nostalgia, and they find themselves somewhat bordering familiar and unfamiliar sounds. These sounds have no basis from the original Mario 64, but they maintain a believable style through composition and sound font to sound like they still belong in Mario 64. These unique, thematically fitting songs help to sell the idea that B3313 is an extended version of Mario 64. Adding to the credibility of these tracks, Mario 64 style remixes are often created for past Mario music, and future Mario music. To add an extra layer of fictional continuity in the player's mind. But that's not to say there isn't a good share of custom music that's able to accurately replicate the N64, and specifically the Mario 64 style. These types of sounds definitely contribute the least to the overall horror of the game, but similar to Mario's goofy beta voice lines, they help to set the stage. They give a very dreamlike feeling to even the game's most mundane moments, and they help to give the game a foundation to build upon sound-wise. Effective horror can't be achieved by just throwing scary things one after another at the player. See section 3 of the video. And these sounds help to provide the non-horrific foundation for the game. Going a bit deeper into B3313's distortion of nostalgia, we get to altered sounds. I categorize altered sounds as ones that take something from Mario 64 and, well, alter it. This can be in a variety of ways, but it can't be drastic enough to cause a blur in recognizability, and it can't be too subtle for the player to not even recognize a difference. An example of this that's basically omnipresent throughout B3313 is the alteration of the castle theme. The track that plays while you're in Peach's Castle in Mario 64 is one of the most iconic from the game, and Peach's Castle is honestly one of the most iconic hub areas in gaming as a whole. icon status, B3313 clearly has to distort it in a variety of ways. There are dozens of variations of Peach's castle theme throughout the game, each ranging in appearance, function, and, of course, music. Generally, these musical variations are quite subtle, but as they continue to loop as you explore the familiar yet unfamiliar area, you begin to pick up on the minor changes and can't unhear them. My best comparison for what these sound like is if you ever hear music in a dream. You don't pick up on the inconsistencies of your recollection quickly, maybe not even until you wake up much later, but eventually you realize it, and it has a very unnerving quality. There are plenty of other altered tracks throughout the game, far too many for me to give them each individual attention as much as I would like to, but here's a small sample of a few that I think do a really good job at providing a really evocative atmosphere. The final method, and honestly most personally interesting to me, I call redefined sounds. Redefined sounds are ones that are present in the base game and remain nearly or completely unaltered audio-wise, with their effect instead arising from the context in which they're used and trained player reactions. Now, all that might sound kind of abstract, and I get it, so I think it's best if I just show an example and talk a bit about how it's used. For that, I've chosen one of my personal favorite sounds in B3313, and one that continues to get a jump out of me basically every time I hear it in-game. Yeah, not necessarily the most bone-chilling sound, and I think that's what makes it interesting. In the original Mario 64, this sound is internally referred to as Warp 2. It's used in the original game for when you exit a painting, designating a location change. In B3313, it retains its purpose, but it's also used when, well, when something happens. I say that vaguely for a reason, because there really isn't a clear-cut meaning when you hear the sound. It's used for normal transitional purposes, odd, seemingly random events occurring, jump scare sounds, and even, well, nothing at all. It causes you to scramble in confusion, wondering what just happened. I know, at least in my case, as I played B3313 for an increasingly long amount of time, my brain kind of got rewired to perceive this completely non-threatening sound that I've heard all my life as a threat. Anytime I heard it outside of its usual context, I had a sort of shock reaction, frantically trying to find out what's going on. I think it's cool and really resourceful that, of all the sounds the team could have used to act as a sort of horror stinger, they chose one that most people don't initially think twice about in the base game, and they train them to perceive it in an entirely different way. And the fact that that's even possible in a ROM hack of a nearly 30-year-old game just goes to show how trained personal experiences can be so effective in creating horror. Of all three sections, I think this one is probably the most broadly applicable to horror games and horror media as a whole. The contents of this section are generally effective horror principles in general, but they're enhanced even more by how B3313 plays off of the source material and what players would come to expect. Silence is, in my opinion, easily the most underrated tool in all of horror. And I don't mean ominous ambience, no low drones, no scary strings number 17 from a stock sound library. Actual silence. In most games, silence is absent. There's always some kind of music playing, and when there's not, there's at least something else. Ambient sounds, dialogue, whatever it may be. In B3313, though, there are a select few moments where all sound is completely absent, bar the sounds that the players themselves make through their movement. This often comes on very suddenly, and it's completely disorienting. This level of silence is extremely uncommon in games, especially Mario 64, and its presence immediately registers as hostile in the player's mind. Silence works here not just because it's unusual, but because it strips away one of the things the players can depend on always being there: music. With that being taken away, it feels like the game has stopped acknowledging you. Like you're somewhere you're not supposed to be, somewhere where something bad could happen very, very soon. But whether that actually happens, of course, is up in the air. Sometimes something not happening can be the most unusual thing of all. It's when the game sets up the expectation that something should occur and then absolutely refuses to deliver. In most horror games, tension exists to be released. You wait for the scare, the reveal, the payoff. In B3313, that payoff frequently never comes, and that lack of resolution becomes its own kind of threat. There are moments clearly designed to set you on edge: strange geometry, eerie lighting, a generally foreboding atmosphere, and then nothing. No jump scare, no death, and of course, no sound. I've referred to this technique in this section as Stasis, partially because I wanted to keep the alliteration in the title, but also because I think it does a good job at portraying what makes these scenarios very uncomfortable. That suspended moment, when the game withholds both the sound and scare that you're expecting, becomes its own kind of horror. It's a short silence that feels intentional, like the game is toying with you. Like it knows that it can wait for an even better moment to get you in the future, leaving you with your unresolved fear for the time being. That's the lava bubble from the Lethal Lava Land painting. I've heard a lot of people say that it scared them as a kid, but I personally was never afraid of it. I guess I was just the roughest, toughest, most mature kindergartner to ever grace this planet. But that clip I just played, that was the moment in the game that scared me the most. No build-up, no screamer sound, just that. It completely caught me off guard. It was out of nowhere, and the lack of sound and impact when it made contact with me just left me sitting there, dwelling on the crash screen. This brings us to our final element of horror to be discussed in this section: subversion. So many times in B3313, the scares subvert your expectation in some way, Whether it's by using no sound at all, like the lava bubble example, or maybe by using a completely uncharacteristic sound for the situation. B3313 constantly uses sound in unexpected ways, ensuring each horror moment leaves you more confused and on edge than the last. As a holistic example for this section, I'd like to show a clip that I think effectively implements all three of these techniques through sound to create a shocking but not overdone horror event. Loading into the area, the relatively normal rendition of the castle theme is stripped away, and you're immediately met with an oppressive absence of sound. Silence. Already on edge, you look up at the giant cake in front of you, obviously too good to be true, and you see the giant power star at the top. It's the most obvious trap ever, but seeing the situation you're in, you don't really have another choice. As you're able to safely approach the cake, your confidence may build slightly. You jump at it, failing a few times due to its height, but eventually you hit the perfect jump, and you immediately start sinking into the cake, the piercing sound of Mario 64's quicksand audio hissing at you. A sound that's been trained in your mind as one of Mario 64's deadliest hazards suddenly audibly assaults you as you helplessly sink. Any player would have expected the actual trap to have happened when the power star was grabbed, causing this unpleasant sound and punishment to catch them by surprise. Subversion. And yet, when it's all said and done, nothing happens. Mario loses a life, of course, but they're launched out of the painting as usual. There was no purpose, no greater meaning, and the player is left to wander through the castle plexus yet again. Stasis. I'll be honest, this was a hard game for me to play. Not because it was bad, far from it. I actually admire B3313 a lot. As you can probably tell, it's ambitious, overflowing with ideas, and it nails exactly what it aims to do. And what it aims to do is personally affect people just like me. Everything about this game is designed to grab my little Mario 64 loving sponge of a brain out of the nostalgic reservoir of Jolly Roger Bay, forcefully wring it out onto the castle floor, and then dunk it in the boiling mess of Mandela effect mishmash that is B3313's blazing bully bass. What? It's hard to make analogies that specific, okay? But the point stands, this game gets under my skin. It doesn't just unsettle me on a surface level. It violates memories I hold close and weaponizes a part of my childhood against me. As I was playing the game to get background gameplay, my roommates were watching. I know for a fact they didn't find it even remotely scary or uncomfortable, and that makes sense. Neither of them has touched Mario 64 in their life. They were too busy playing like, I don't know, Lego Star Wars or something, while I was 2 console generations behind. This game isn't made for them. It's made for me, and for the thousands of people who share this bizarre mix of nostalgia and dread. I think the key point I've been looking to convey is that the most effective horror isn't achieved by making a game widely appealing. That's not to say a game can't have a broad appeal and be great, but I don't think you can achieve fear at its highest form. No. True horror comes from creating something deeply personal. Something aimed at a specific shared experience. Even if that audience is 1,000 people, 100, or a dozen. B3313 and its great use of sound succeeds because they don't try to scare the player, they try to scare me. And I'm not afraid of a monster. I'm afraid of a memory. And the monsters too. There are definitely some pretty scary monsters. There's a lot of fun horror events that I couldn't talk about for the sake of time, or just they didn't really fit into the video, but I figured it would be worth showing a few of my favorites. They're honestly not really as scary out of context, and they're kind of silly at times, but hey, that's fun in its own right. Enjoy a few monsters as I credit some very helpful people.
Thank you so much for playing my game.